Hi, Daniella.
How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you today?
Okay.
Good. Oh, it's lovely to have you here and well done for making it. I know it's a bit nerve-wracking going onto a new platform.
I was like, did I click the right thing? I'm just going to figure out how to pin you. Can I pin you? Or
I'm not sure you
maybe not. That's all right. It'll be doing what it's doing. It's lovely to see you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. And so this is recorded. We will post it within the hub for people to be able to watch it back. And then in the future, if people have, questions, we can always refer them to it. Or if they search anything to do with allergies on the hub, you'll pop up. We also post it on YouTube as well, so people will be able to find you and their conversation there too. So let's get started.
Yeah.
Please, would you introduce yourself and let us know a bit about what you do day to day and with, Grow with psychology.
Thank you. That's all right. So I'm Danielle. I'm an accredited cognitive behavior therapist.
Yeah.
I've been in psychology and mental health for the last 20 plus years and a therapist for 15 years. And I do CBT, so cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and EMDR as well. So day to day, I'm literally a therapist. So I work with adults. So whether it is, anyone presenting with anxiety difficulties or depression or low self-esteem, and I specialize in maternal mental health care. So I work with lots of expecting and new and established moms, and I also work with adults, whether they're individuals with food allergies or parents of children with food allergies, to help them navigate that, because it is a journey that's filled with anxiety. So yeah, I'm a mom to two, and one of my daughters does have food allergies to dairy, eggs, peanuts, and some tree nuts still. And that's why I chose to specialize, really, because even though I trained as a therapist and I learned how to work with like long-term conditions and all that. I know when I started my journey as an allergy parent and I was looking around, I was like, gosh, I wonder if there wasn't anybody around to like give this support in navigating this journey. So I took time to kind of specialize and do my training more into it, and that's what I do.
Oh, it's wonderful. And I'm so happy to meet you a year or two ago now and just
Yeah.
understand about what you do, because it is something that just feels so much more common now, and actually having the mental health support to go along with all of the, tick checklists you have to go through and the practical things. It is something that parents do struggle with. So can you tell me a bit about you'd mentioned pregnancy and, new
Yeah.
babies. What kinds of, I'm sure there's a very long list, but can you tell me the most common kind of allergies that people might be coming across at these life stages with their children and babies?
Of course. I mean, I think the first thing, we talked about pregnancy, so let's start there,
Yeah.
is that actually for us as humans and as individuals, we can develop food allergies at any point in our lives. Because we always think it's from birth, but actually it can also happen much later in life. So for example, my husband, we were on a holiday in France a couple of years ago when my eldest was very tiny. And he's been eating nuts all his life, by the way. No known food allergies, I should say.
Yeah.
And we went to restaurants and they served raw hazelnuts on top of his soup. And he started to have a quite severe allergic reaction. So just want to say, like, not to increase anybody's anxiety at all, just to normalize that we can develop allergies and intolerances at any point, really. And he talked about, like, after birth. So one thing is that, so if you think about tiny babies, dairy is what we give babies as their formula. So if you're not breastfeeding,
Yeah.
you're probably giving it your baby who is bottle fed, and that contains dairy, right? So that could be one of the earliest indicators that something is off if you are bottle feeding, and you're noticing, for example, like your baby's unsettled or like a rash or lots of like pooey nappies, and it can be tricky because I remember when my eldest was born, I'm sure you noticed in my and they say, oh, like newborns go through like 12 nappies a day, like look out for like, like yellow poo, which is normal for breastfed babies, but ours continued much longer than it needed to, if that makes sense, because I was breastfeeding. And also what we eat goes through our breast milk, right? And the thing is, sometimes GPs give us incorrect information. So that's what I received, which is that it can't possibly pass through your breast milk, Daniela. It must be just she has wind or something like that, like trapped wind. But actually, it was the dairy that I was eating, and I made sure to make a note of it. Like, as in, I would literally have dairy. And then, a couple hours later after her feed, after she become really unsettled and her eczema will flare. So when you're breastfeeding, just remembering what you have is what you're eating is what your baby's having through your breast milk.
That's a confusing one when you are being told by a healthcare professional that no, that's not true. And why is that? Why is there such a disconnect? Is it just literally a case of evidence taking a while to filter through to training?
I think so. And I think also some of them, they rely on old sorts of, like how things used to be, whereas about the data now, and even, so like that was a big disconnect. And then when you talk about weaning, so when they're just born, it can pass through our breast milk depending on what we're eating. And if your baby is allergic, you might notice, but dairy seems to be one of the more prominent things. Also, when we start weaning, it could be literally anything. Like there are the top 14 allergens. You can look at Allergy UK. They have a full list of everything. But top ones include things like, they said it talks about dairy, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, celery, mustard, and there are a couple of others as well. If you think about it, when we're weaning, right, we're giving like legumes, and we're giving, chicken, and we're giving dairy or peanut butter or scrambled eggs when we're weaning, so it might be that as you're going through the process of weaning, that you notice that, your baby might have an intolerance or an allergy to a specific food. And again, or even if you've touched them, you might notice, oh, where did that hive come from? If you've had eggs, and then you touch them, and they're allergic to eggs. Hope that helps.
It does, yeah, it really does. And it's one of those that you're just not going to know until you try these things. So not to be scared to try them, but also be aware of what the signs are, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really the key thing in Milana. I actually wish that when I was, for both my pregnancies, I wish that they talked a bit more about here are the signs of what an allergic reaction looks like, because I've never had, like, I have one family member who's allergic to peanuts, right? And he's a much younger cousin, so he just never ate peanuts, right? That's all we knew. We didn't have an EpiPen or anything, and so he just didn't eat peanuts. And in Trinidad, we don't cook with peanuts quite often, so that was something he could exclude. But you don't know until you know, right?
No.
Like they introduce foods one at a time, which I think is the best advice. Like introduce one new food at a time, because then you can see what's happening. But I really wish they would tell us a bit more about what reactions to look out for, what intolerances might look like, what allergic reactions might look like in babies, and what to do, really.
Yeah. And then awareness is key.
Awareness is key.
So let's say your baby, or you have found you've got an allergy, your baby's got an allergy. Why can it be so mentally challenging for someone? It might sound like an obvious question, I suppose, but what, from your experience and what you see, and like what's a normal reaction for people to have?
There's a range, which is, and I want to make room for all of the feelings, and I'm going to talk about them, and some of them I might even have time to. But the first one is anxiety, because like you said, we just don't know, right? Uncertainty creates anxiety for us as humans. I mean, I really like certainty. I don't know about you, but even if I'm working from home, I check my weather app. What is the weather going to be like today, right? Even though I'm in my house, right? We like that sense of certainty. So anxiety is a real big one, like as in that worry about, like, have I done something wrong? Like, will it happen again? But also that guilt.
Yeah.
But, gosh, did I do this to my baby? Have I caused it? Is it my fault my baby has this allergy? You know, so that could be a lot of parents or guilt, not just for moms, but for dads as well. Like, is it my fault that my baby has this allergy? But also, there could be denial because, you know, it's not something that's talked about. Remember I said to you earlier that the GP was like, maybe it's just trapped wind. You know what I mean? So, and if everybody else who's really well-meaning is saying all these other things as well, it can be that you also think, well, maybe it is just an intolerance. Maybe it's not an allergy, you know, so that, because that's a big life change as well, having to shift from, you know, eating a specific way to maybe adjusting. It's a huge life adjustment.
And just on that, sorry to interrupt, but what's the difference between intolerance and allergy?
So there's a big difference. So in terms of the intolerance, right, we get different symptoms. So it might be that, you know, you get like upset tummy, you have to go to the toilet, you may get hives as well in terms of intolerance, but the reaction is very different from an allergy. And allergy is a lot more severe. And even within the allergy, it could be from, you know, a mild allergy to a more severe one, which is anaphylaxis, which is life-threatening, and you need to, you know, use your EpiPens and go to the emergency. You need to call basically 4999 if that's the situation. But it can be a part of it as well as breathing can change in terms of its allergic reaction. You might see people talk about their throat closing up. That is anaphylaxis. And one is signs of anaphylaxis in terms of getting dizzy or floppy. That is also kind of a sign of anaphylaxis as well. You know, and also so intolerance, think of it as like, this does upset me, but it's not life-threatening, whereas when it's an allergy, it can definitely be a lot more life-threatening.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be, but it's on that scale, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting there.
No. I love that you asked, because it's a question I guess asked all the time, and it's because it's not the same, you know. So if you have an intolerance, you won't get prescribed certain your care plan might look different, you know. So because you're not necessarily getting it, if you have an intolerance, you won't need an EpiPen, for example, you know. Whereas if you had a severe food allergy and you were getting, like I talked about, you know, like, you know, your throat closing up, you know, floppiness or loss of consciousness, that kind of stuff, then you need to have your EpiPen, because that's the drug to help you, or whatever epinephrine, you know, to help you to get better as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
This is severity.
Okay. So we were was there anything else to add to my question around, you know, the things that would be completely normal for someone to feel?
I think we touched on, you know, like anger, denial, frustration, like, you know, like, because you're trying to make sense of this very difficult thing. What I would say is, if you suspect your little one has an intolerance or an allergy, it's not necessarily for you to decide or determine. Write it down. Make a note of it. Like, write down what they're eating, or if you're breastfeeding, what you're eating and what you notice. Because when you go to your GP, then you have like data to say like whether this is what's been happening, this is my experience, and then they can use that information to make a more informed choice about whether to, you know, refer you onward to the allergy clinic, or whether the dietitian or whatever would need to happen, if that makes sense. And I think there also things mentally challenging, like as in everybody means to be well-meaning, right? In Milano, they say like, oh, maybe it'll get better, or maybe they'll grow out of it, which is really lovely. But when they grow out of it, or, you know, or things don't get better, then a lot of what I've found is a lot of parents then blame themselves, which is, I must be doing something wrong if my child has not grown out of it by the time they're 5. But we're humans, right? So we're not computer programs. There's no kind of algorithm to say it's going to end by this time or change by this time. And I think there's also like the hypervigilance, so the always being on edge when your child has an intolerance or food allergy, about, you know, them getting into contact, because yes, an intolerance, the symptoms might be different and maybe not as severe as an allergy, but it is really uncomfortable for your little one, you know, and for you as well, you know. So it's all of that as well. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything, like fear of like judgment as well, that around that?
Yeah, because a lot of it is that you must have done something wrong. Like, I know when I got a lot of judgment, like from, you know, my friends and family in the Caribbean who all around me, and like, what did you do to me? 'Cause I'm like, I didn't do anything for her to have eczema and food allergies. It just happens. You know, I have one child with food allergies and one without.
Yeah.
Same mom, same dad, same gene. You know,
Yeah.
there is no rhyme or reason. And I think it is that fear of judgment that you've done something wrong, but also that fear of judgment when you go out and you do social things, whether it's in a restaurant, like you're inconveniencing other people, or if you go to a party, there's that fear of judgments about, you know, are they judging me because I've had to bring food to keep them safe, or equally, are they excluding my child because of their food allergies, which we hear way too often, or you hear that they're being a fussy eater. They're not fussy. Sometimes if your baby is you know, spitting things out, it could be that it's too, what we call, spicy for their mouth. You know, they might think it's too spicy because it's something tingling. So that judgments as well. I have a friend who said to me, she has a dairy intolerance, and she said to me, Daniela, every mom growing up in Portugal, my mom would make me drink a cup of milk because, you know, you have to drink milk every day for calcium, right? It's good for you. And she's like, I would be forced to drink this cup of milk every morning, and I would be vomiting it on my way to school because my stomach, up to now, she's still really intolerant, you know. So even that, you know, like, as in these expectations of what we should be eating, and then it being forced, you know, her mom was like, you must drink this milk, you know, and she's like, oh, I can't, like, I'm ill, you know, and then getting in trouble for not drinking the milk.
Yeah.
You know.
And the body's I think that's something quite interesting there. Like, maybe past generations have almost forced things because that's what you should do. That's what they've learned. They've tried to, obviously, like you say, calcium is something that's good for us. And so that it comes from a place of wanting you to be healthy. But we know so much more now. And when we look at our babies and our children and how they reject things, actually, that's them, their bodies being amazing and keeping them safe and telling you what. So it's tuning into that, isn't it?
And I think holding some of those expectations a bit lightly, and, you know, just knowing that you know, trusting yourself and your baby. And like I said, if you're not sure, write it down, take it to your GP. That's the best thing I would say for anybody is, if you're not sure, speak to your GP, you know.
And if your GP does maybe doesn't feel like they're completely listening, or maybe on the same page or understanding, what would you suggest someone does then?
So I'm going to be really honest with my eldest. I went many times to the GP. Like, Emil and I probably went like 8 times within a 2-month period, because I was like, this is not just whatever. I kept, because I worked in the NHS before. I know that sometimes they're pressed for time. I'm not a GP, obviously, but I know that they are pressed for time. And I was like, no, this doesn't feel right. Like, I followed my mom gut instincts that I, you know, being a CBT therapist, more writing things down. So I'm like, no, I had dairy. This is what the reaction. I had this is what the reaction was, you know, and just going about that, you know. So I can just keep going. If you feel you aren't listened to, you know, ask to speak to a different GP. And if you still not feel like you're listened to, speak to the practice manager, because at the end of the day, you know, it's about getting the support that you need, and your GP is there as your first protocol for support. You know, then they can then refer you outwards where needed, but they're the ones who have to make the referral. So I'll always say, go.
And who might you be referred to if a referral happens?
Yeah, so you should get referred to your local hospital for their allergy clinic. It is your children's outpatient. And then, so when you get referred, they'll most likely, you know, I know they're waiting times, but then you'll eventually see your allergy consultant, your allergy nurse, and they will probably, what they tend to do is, you know, when you go in, they weigh your baby, measures, or depending on how old your child is, and then they kind of checking to see what you want, which is why that documenting things really helps, because then you can go in and say, this is what I've noticed, this is his or her symptoms, this is what I'll take pictures if you need to in. And what they might do is either do a blood test or a skin prick test. And it is uncomfortable, I'm not going to lie. It is, because it's something, you know, you're pricking a little one, and it's going to be something that's probably very itchy for them. But the good news is that usually after 15 minutes, you get called back in, they check to see the results, and you can administer antihistamines, which will kind of help to reduce the discomfort. So that's what they'll usually do. And or your GP might, or depending on what the presentation is, they might refer to the diet to your dietitian. Usually most GPs have an in-house dietitian as well. So yeah, that's what they'll tend to do.
Okay, and if someone was keen to go down the private route, what would they be looking for?
So there are private consultants out there. I would say there's some amazing consultants out there, such as like Dr. Adam Fox, and I would really say to like go on if you're ever concerned. There's some really amazing websites out there, such as Allergy UK, the Natasha Allergy Research Foundation, so NARF. There's also Anaphylaxis UK, but just make sure whoever you're going to is an accredited person. That's the biggest thing, is that there are lots of like at-home testing kits. The best thing is to go to consultants with experience, so that because then they can look at the holistic picture and be able to diagnose accurately. But more important, they just also diagnose, but also give you the appropriate treatment plan for your child's presentation, whether it's an intolerance or whether it's an allergy.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. It's good for people to just understand kind of all the options available. So we'll put those links under the video as well. And so, I guess it can feel quite overwhelming because you're not only maybe you're recovering from birth and becoming a new parent or adding to your family with other children running around. What coping strategies would you suggest that people could have in their toolbox to be able to pull out, on those days of overwhelm or feeling, like it's a lot?
I think you just literally just said one of them, which is notice that you're overwhelmed and it's feeling like a lot. I think that's the first step, is noticing. And you'll always hear me talk about this, is take a breath. Because Emiliana, with kids, I don't know about you, but it feels like we're just running. You're going from one thing to the next to the next.
Yes.
And you really slow down. So one thing I would really encourage any parents to do, I know it sounds really simple, but take an intentional breath. Because by doing that, you actually earn about 3 full seconds by just expanding your lungs with air and gently exhaling. And what it allows you to do is just have that little time to kind of think, okay, what's going on? What do I need? Or what does my child need? And what would be helpful in this moment? And I think the really important thing is to know is you do what works for your family, right? For me, I know that what I do, I'm just talking about me for a second, as I'm an allergy parent myself, is for the first, couple of years of her life, I just walked around with snacks in her bag. If she's going to a party, I packed her own snacks because I realized that not everybody was allergy aware. So I would just pack things to be on a safe side so that she wouldn't be left out. And I would just message someone to say, hey, I know it's so-and-so's party next weekend. Can you let me know what you'll be serving? So getting some of that knowledge and certainty is what would you be offering, so then I can bring, like for like where possible, or have things that she could see that she can share with. And that's talking and communicating with another parent has been really helpful. And that's what I always encourage people to do as well. But do what works for you. I think that's really important. Have a clear plan. Practice it if you need to, depending on how old your child is. I think it's never too early to talk to your child and their siblings about how to manage certain situations. So we're going to this barbecue later, there's going to be different foods. What can you do if someone offers you, this is what you can say. Or maybe you have a rule. If they're under 5, always come to ask mummy, no matter who's offering it, whether even if it's nanny or granddad, always ask mummy or daddy, or you have an adult to go back to. But I think it's also thinking about, it takes up a lot, like allergies and intolerance takes up a lot of space, emotional space. And you talked about feeling overwhelmed. When we get overwhelmed, it's trickier to problem solve. And I think sometimes coming back to the kind of parent you want to be in that moment, or the kind of person you want to be in that moment, is actually one of the biggest things that you can do. Is, what is the tiniest thing I can do in this moment to meet my child or myself in this moment? Whether it's to be kind, or just slow down, or just give them a hug, or just ask them, what do you need?
Really lovely and good advice. And I think it would be really good for you to share what you do with people as well. Like what could someone expect if they were booking, some sessions with you because they are feeling that overwhelm and maybe need a bit more one-to-one guidance?
Yeah, I mean, what I always say to everybody is let's book in a 15-minute consultation call, because every therapist is different. And I always want people to know that they have choice. So I would say, let's have a call. Let's talk about kind of briefly what's been happening. And I also tell people how I work so that they can decide. And when you work with me, first things first, I always try to take some time. So I use CBT and acceptance and commitment therapy mainly when I work with allergies. But if there's trauma, I'll use EMDR as well. But for me, when I work with people, it's about getting to know, like, how is this impacting your life and what do you want to get from our time together? Whether it's tools, like you said, whether it's managing the anxiety, whether it is learning how to navigate this journey. Because it's, for me, I think about from going from surviving to thriving, and it's a mindset change. One is there is danger everywhere, which there is danger everywhere, Miliana, but also kind of noticing, like, how do I want to manage this hypervigilance and this risk? Because they are important, the risk is there, but how do you navigate that to live a more meaningful and full life? Yeah.
You are an amazing resource for people, and I hope that people will, investigate kind of what you do if they're feeling that, because it can feel like all the focus is on the child and what's going on, but it is so important to take that time for yourself as well, because they're looking up at you. So it's how you're coping as well is important.
100%. They are looking up at us and they learn from us, so when they see us freaking out, they're gonna freak out. If they can see this as like, it's okay to be scared and live safely and navigate this safely, they'll learn from you from that.
I just wanted to add a little something I saw a few weeks ago with my daughter's age. She's 10 and she has a friend who has got quite severe allergies, and her parents are just so proud of how she navigates that. And I just wanted to sort of mention that like as a team, as a family, and then they can go on to be very like aware, and and her brother as well is always keeping her safe, and it can actually be a real bonding process. Like I saw that in that family, and I was like, wow, they're an amazing team together in this. So yeah, it was lovely to see. Although I'm sure challenging over the years, but yeah, it's lovely.
Challenging, but you know what? How lovely is that to hear that they're advocating themselves and the other people who love them are advocating for them as well. I think that's like such a beautiful thing, and I also feel very heartwarmed when I see kids in my eldest, who's 9 years old, class, say, she comes home, she says, "Mummy, so and so is having a chocolate," and she says to me, "Emily, I'm having a chocolate, so I'm just going to wash my hands, before we play." And she's like, "Mommy, I really appreciate that." So little things, it makes a big difference. So thank you for this space. I loved it. And I hope people find it helpful as well.
I know they will, and we'll be talking about it, and on an ongoing basis as well, to make sure new people who are joining every day know that it's here. And just want to thank you for your time again, Daniella, and please do touch, and I'll put all your links and things so if people have questions, if you're happy for me to direct them to you, that would be great.
Then happy. Thank you so much, my lovely.
Have a lovely
rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.